Welcome back to the Antisocial Podcast. Thank you so much. This is part 2 of my little catch-up episode. If you were listening last week, I waffled on for about an hour and a half of basically what's been happening over the last 2.5 months. There's been a lot going on, some big moments in my life, and I thought it'd be a good idea, mainly for myself, to get it out there and just articulate it and also document it. So maybe, and it probably won't ever happen, but if I ever feel the need to go back and listen to myself in however many years' time, I can get a bit of an understanding of where my mind was at that point in time in my life, or, you know, someone else might want to listen to it. So in this episode, I'm going to pick up where I left off. There's a couple of things that I forgot to mention on the previous episode, so I'll quickly tick those off. I will try and make this a little bit shorter than last week, but if you have enjoyed it, then thank you so much, and that's good news. If this is a bit too much, or, as I said in the last episode, if this is the first episode of the Antisocial Podcast that you've tuned into, press pause or press stop now and go back and listen to a previous episode with one of the amazing guests that I've had over the past 12 months. That's what the podcast is all about. But what I also do is throw in a few in-between episodes, a few things where I just waffle on by myself as well. But I'd like to think that the podcast is moving in a direction where it's going to be more guest-based, and where I really start to talk to people, learn about what they do, get new perspectives on life, and just learn things, you know. So it's not a very original format, as I've mentioned previously, but it's something that I do enjoy doing. So if you do want to check out any of the episodes, YouTube, obviously on your podcast app, they're all there. So by all means, go back and have a listen if this is the first time you've checked out the podcast. And of course, thank you for clicking and giving it a shot in the first place. So what I mentioned right at the end of last episode was all of Prog Power, and, you know, the 4 or 5 days of being in Atlanta and my experiences, especially being on the other side of the fence, being a musician or a performing artist at the festival rather than being a fan, which I was last year. And that was really good. So a lot of those things I touched on. One thing that I didn't make a mention of, which is not very important, but it was quite funny at the time, and I thought it'd be a good thing to actually record and put out there. When we were in Atlanta and we were leaving to head back home, so we had, what were we doing? We were flying out of Atlanta to LA, then we had like an hour or an hour and a half stopover in LA, and then we flew from LA to Sydney. So it wasn't too bad of a flight back, but we were flying back on Sunday, September 11th. Now, I was talking to a few people that were all like, because the festival ends on the Saturday night, so majority of the people that go to Prog Power each year are from all corners of the United States. It's quite amazing, really, because it's just this pilgrimage of metal fans that just jump on planes and just travel to Atlanta and just party for 4 or 5 days. It's really, really cool. So, and for a lot of them, the only time of the year that they see each other is at Prog Power. So it's a bit of a reunion, and it's definitely got this family vibe, and it's really cool. But on the Sunday, the majority of the people that go to the festival all head home on the Sunday so they can get back in time for work on the Monday. But I was talking to a few people over the weekend, and some people were actually deliberately booking flights on the Monday because they didn't want to fly on September 11th. Now, there was a couple of reasons for that from what people said. First one was the obvious, that they just felt uneasy flying on that day, which I guess from a logical point of view probably doesn't make a great deal of sense, because the likelihood of something happening on that same day is probably very slim. But I guess from an emotional point of view, I can certainly appreciate that reason. The other part was the extra security that would be put on for that day at all the airports. And Atlanta's a big airport and a very busy airport, so I think a lot of people sort of were preempting that there would be longer queues, a lot harder to sort of get through to their gates and whatnot, and just be a little bit of that extra stress that they didn't need. And trust me, if you fly domestically in the US, it's not an easy thing at all. the security is insane. And look, to be honest, it's probably not as insane as what it used to be because the rest of the world's starting to catch up, especially I've noticed in Europe. But it's definitely not an easy process. And given that you're in a country of 300 plus million people, every airport's busy and there's long lines. So I certainly had a new appreciation for flying back home in Australia, where the queues are very small and much easier to get around the country than it is in the US. So on a normal day, it can be quite stressful flying on any of the airlines within the United States. But on September 11th, with extra security and whatnot, a lot of people were expecting it to be a lot worse than usual. So I can understand that. So a lot of people talking about these things, these reasons. And when we got closer and closer to Sunday for us to fly home, and I think we had an evening flight or late afternoon flight. I think actually it was an evening flight. I think we had like a 7 p.m. or something along those lines in the evening. So I was thinking more and more about it and thinking, oh, geez, all right, mentally prepare. This is going to be a long day. It's going to be, it's really going to have to be relaxed and just go with the flow. And then if someone is being difficult or stressed out, like the TSA or whatever, just comply and just go with the flow. So I think we'd all sort of had it in the back of our head, so we're ready to go. So we didn't go to the airport until the afternoon because we ended up having brunch with Jeff Teets and his girlfriend from Mind Maze, and Jeff's from Mind Maze, not his girlfriend, and then we met up with Brian Galloway, our sponsor, one of our sponsors, and then we headed to the airport after that. So it was cool just to say a final goodbye to those guys and just do a quick catch up, but. When we got to the airport, we did the usual headache of checking in with Delta because of our whole baggage thing. It was easier than the previous times in LA and New York, but still wasn't seamless. But once we got through there, we had to take our oversized luggage to oversized luggage guy. So we carried our guitars and everything down, and the guy who was accepting them said something along the lines of, and I'm probably not going to get this 100% correct, but he had just a really thick Southern accent and something along the lines of, like, are these lock and arms? Or he just said lock and arms. And I was the first one with my guitar first. And he said, what's in there? What's in there? Lock and arms or something like that. So in my head, I'm like, oh, we're in the deep South. People carry their guns everywhere. I don't know what I was thinking apart from, I was just thinking about guns. And I said, when he asked what was in there, I said, guns. And everyone just gasped straight away, went, oh, and the guy didn't even flinch. And I went, no, sorry. I meant there's a guitar in there, not a gun. And the guy sort of just went, whatever, picked up the guitar and moved it off to the side, went to the next one. And everyone around me's going, you idiot, you moron. Just like laughing, but like this really nervous laughter. And we're like, this is September 11th as well. Like even, just to make things worse. And I think we're already on edge and trying to behave and comply and not say anything stupid or joke about anything. And here I am just blurting out that I've got a gun in this big guitar case. And then, so Mark's giving me shit about that. And then his guitar's next. And the guy says, what's in here? And he says, a gun. and then he realized that he said it and just more or less the same reaction, just gasped and like went to put his hands over his mouth and said, no, guitar. And so the same thing happened again. And then Tim was okay. Tim managed to compose himself and just confirm that there was actually a guitar in his guitar case, not a gun. And so anyway, that was fine. And off we went. And we sort of said to each other, what's the bet that TSA actually goes and searches our guitar cases? And sure enough, by the time we picked up our guitars in Sydney, they all had been ripped open and TSA tape around them and whatever to say they'd been inspected. So, it wasn't exactly the smoothest operation there on our behalf. We certainly put our foots in it. So it's a nice way to end our time in the deep South. And on September 11th, of course, as well. So anyway, I thought of that when I finished recording the previous episode, and I thought I'd just throw that in for a bit of a laugh anyway. So anyway, we got home and I had a few days at home, just I guess, which was quite good because I had time just to get over a bit of jet lag, unpack, repack, clean up, get a few things done that were sort of left open-ended before the wedding happened and everything like that. Sort of everything just sort of stopped, and I had a lot of loose ends that needed to be fixed up. So I had a few days at home, and that was quite good. So we got a few things done before we went to Europe. So as I said in the last episode, Jess and I had to do a bit of compromise and negotiation and try and work out what was the best scenario because of where Prog Power landed only a couple of weeks or a week and a half after our wedding. And I certainly didn't want to be the horrible new husband and get married and straight away jet off overseas and leave my now wife at home. So as mentioned in the previous episode, we went to Melbourne straight away the next day for 4 or 5 days or whatever it was. And then we went off to the US as a band and just stayed at home just to I don't know, just to find things to do. She had plenty of stuff to do at home anyway, and wait for me to come back before we would go overseas to Europe. So after a few days at home, when we got home from the US, we went back to the airport, well, Jess and I did, and caught a plane to Europe. So we planned a honeymoon in Europe that was going to be about 4.5 weeks. Originally, well, look, I've got a history of trying to cram in as much as possible. I've done trips to Japan where I've been there for 10 days and tried to go to 10 cities or, as many cities as possible. I'm always trying to move and do things, and I've had an itinerary and whatnot. It works quite well. I like it, but I always come back exhausted and not really having a true holiday in the sense of recharging the batteries and having, new perspective and being refreshed and whatever. So Jess was very adamant that we were not going to do that on our honeymoon, and I more or less agreed with what she was saying. I thought it would be nice just to really slow this down and not have to worry about gallivanting around the place and trying to consume as much of our surroundings as possible. So what we decided to do is break our honeymoon up into 2 main sections. We would stay in one place for a couple of weeks, and then we'd stay in another place for a couple of weeks. We would pick Airbnb rather than a hotel, one, because it's cheaper, but also because the great thing about Airbnb is that you're staying in, well, you can choose whatever you want, but you're staying in an apartment, a private place. You're not sharing with anybody else. You're not in a sterile hotel with, room service and whatnot, daily changing of the sheets and whatever. And, Airbnb's got, it's a home. And we thought the cool thing about this would be not only, save some money to really maximize our trip, but also to feel like we're really living there. So we can go out and not have to worry about spending big bucks each day to go and eat out or have dinner somewhere or whatever. We can go and buy groceries and then come back and cook things and, drink back at home and just sort of really relax and feel like we're living amongst the locals. So we decided that we would do that for 2 locations. Now, years and years ago, the band went to Europe to play a festival in Germany, and on the way back we had an overnight stopover in Prague, and literally got in 8 p.m. at night, and we were back at the airport about 7 o'clock the next morning or 6 o'clock the next morning. But for the couple of hours that we had in Prague itself, walking around, I was absolutely amazed at the city. It was just the most aesthetically pleasing, the most beautiful city I've ever seen. The history, the castles, the age of these buildings, and it's just an amazing looking city. And it was we're walking across the Charles Bridge, and it was about 11 o'clock at night, and we just had goulash, and we paid something like $5 for the meal and $1 or $2 for a large beer, and everything was so cheap. And I just looked around and went, this is an amazing city, and it had this romantic feeling about it. So I had said to Jess when we got home that whenever we get married, I'd love to go there for our honeymoon. And I sort of mentioned it, and I kept it in the back of my mind, but I did forget about it at times. And when it came to thinking about where to go in Europe, Jess said, we need to go to Prague. And I said, oh, that's right, I forgot all about it. So Prague was almost a no-brainer. That was one of them. But the other place, we were trying to work out where to go, and we were looking at a few different places, thinking Austria or somewhere in the east, maybe. just trying to see. We were thinking about Italy as well, but with Jess's, just some of Jess's family being in Italy, and we ended up picking Spain. Neither of us had been to Spain before, and we thought, well, this would be a great excuse to go there for the first time. Originally, we were looking at San Sebastian only because of the Sonata Arctica song for me. I didn't even know the place existed until I heard that song, and it's such an awesome song. So I started researching that place, and it didn't happen for a variety of reasons, but we ended up picking Barcelona. And so we had 2 weeks in Barcelona, or almost 2 weeks in Barcelona, 2 weeks in Prague, and then we were flying in and out of Europe through Amsterdam, so we had a few days in Amsterdam as well. So only 3 locations, 2 main ones, and the whole purpose of this honeymoon was really just to enjoy each other's company, not have to worry about being tourists so much and running around trying to get as many things ticked off the box as possible, and really just feel like we're sort of living with the locals. So we caught Singapore Airlines, and we had a ridiculous leg of flights to Europe. So one thing that I actually should mention, at the airport, I had planned to try our luck to see whether the honeymoon card could get us into business class or some sort of upgrade. So I managed to sneak it into not sneak it in, but I managed to slip it into the conversation with the lady at the check-in counter when we were checking in at Sydney. And obviously these people get it daily from people. So she just said, "Oh, congratulations," and she gave us an express pass through security at the Sydney airport. So while we didn't get business class anywhere on our trip, we did get that little express pass. So I guess that's better than nothing, but it was worth a shot anyway. So if anyone's got any tips on how to upgrade into business class for nothing, let me know. But I was doing a lot of research online as to how people manage to do it without, obviously the points and the reward system and whatnot. So there's quite a lot of interesting theories out there. But if you have had success in doing that, let me know. I'd be curious to see how you did it. But as we said, we were trying to book cheap flights over there. We're trying to really save money, and I wouldn't say we suffered because of it, but it was one hell of a trip just to get to Barcelona, which was our first stop of our trip. So we had a flight from Sydney to Singapore. Now, Singapore's stopover was 8 hours. Initially, I wasn't too worried about it because there's plenty to do at the airport, and if need be, if we're really desperate, we could leave the airport and go into Singapore itself. But we decided to stay there, and by the end of that 8 hours, we were absolutely exhausted to get onto our next flight, which is about 13 hours to Amsterdam. Now, it got worse because once we got to Amsterdam, we had something like an 11-hour stopover in Amsterdam before we needed to before we needed to board our flight to Barcelona. So it was a long, long trip. We did Singapore all the way to Amsterdam, and then we used, it was booked through British Airways, but they use Vueling, I think it is, which is, I'm pretty sure, a Spanish airline. It's like a low-budget airline, which were actually not too bad. There was no issues with them whatsoever. But by the time we got to Barcelona, which was late at night, I think by the time we got to our Airbnb and met up with the host who let us in, it was about, 10, 11 o'clock at night. We were just absolutely exhausted. We hadn't showered in 30, almost 40 hours of travel and layover and whatnot. So we were just disgusting and keen just to try and refresh ourselves and come back to life. Now, Barcelona is a pretty amazing city. We stayed in a place. Now, I should have written this down. No, I'm not even going to bother trying to guess what it was. But it was out of the way. It was in a more local area. It was still pretty much in the city itself, but it was definitely out of the tourist area. So we were about 3 kilometers from the Sagrada Familia, the big church, and about the same from the Gothic Quarter. So it was a decent walk. not decent. I mean, 3 kilometres is not a long way. But, we're fairly close to everything, but still out of the whole tourist area where not only are you dealing with people from other countries and very annoying people at times, but you're also away from a lot of the pickpocketers and, people trying to sell you things and whatnot. Where, obviously they're getting gravitated towards where all the tourists are. So we were out of that way and we sort of blended in with the locals a hell of a lot more, until we tried to open our mouths and communicate with the locals, and that was a different story altogether. But yeah, as I said before, it was just the 2 weeks that we had in Barcelona, it was pretty much eating, drinking and shopping. We did a few of the touristy places. We did the church. We didn't go inside, which a lot of people told us we should have, but it was just way too many people. And I've got this issue with tourists, and especially when I'm more or less a tourist myself, I get quite annoyed. So we didn't go inside the church, but we walked around and took a couple of photos. We went to the Gothic Quarter, which was pretty amazing, but just chaotic, and you really have to be you have to have your wits about you because there's just that many people and a lot of sort of pickpocketing and whatnot. We went to the Picasso Museum, which was cool, and just wandered around. There was another park where I cannot remember, it starts with G, up in the hills, where it's got a great view of Barcelona itself. We went up there as well, which was cool. So we did some touristy things, but more or less we just walked around and went up random streets and found little places to drink and have coffee, have some beers, and just take guesses on the menu and see what we would get to eat. And it was cool. It was really good. I must say, when it comes to shopping, Jess was in her element. One day we actually went on a bus out to a what do you call it? Like a factory outlet shopping village, which was about an hour out of Barcelona, hour north. And I think it's called La Roca Village or something like that. And Jess was in her element. Every brand name, especially all the Spanish brand names, were there. And it was a long day. I managed to have a break for a beer or a couple of beers at one point, but I was carrying a lot of bags and just more or less just staying on my phone because it was just not my thing. But Jess was enjoying it, and so that was good. But there was heaps of shopping there in Barcelona. So Jess was in and out of all the Zaras. I mean, Spain is the land of Zara. I never knew what Zara was until probably a year or so ago, but I certainly know what it is now. And I've been into probably every Zara in Barcelona. Well, probably haven't, but it felt like it. And Jess definitely made the most of it. And Jess has got a background in fashion design, and she's really interested in interior design as well. And also she's got some experience in graphic design also. So she had inspiration all around her, not just the clothing and whatnot, but just the architecture, the buildings, the interiors, and the way that the Spanish had, I don't know, I'm hopeless with this sort of stuff, but, set things up and presented things. So there was a lot of inspiration for her. So she was really sort of in her element there in Barcelona and really enjoyed it. The weather was amazing there. We had a couple of days where there was thunderstorms, but more or less it was just absolutely amazing weather, really sunny and just beautiful days. So that was good. The weird thing with Barcelona, I didn't realize until there, is that they really like their siestas, and it's not as, I assume it's not bad. I'm trying to think of a better word, but I don't think it's as prevalent as what it was probably decades ago. But because it's a bit more, it's a lot more tourists coming in, and there's a lot more people from other countries that are living there. But these guys don't open till late. They close during the day, and then they're open until late at night. And their lunch breaks are long. They're out until God knows what time at night, and then they're back up for work the next day, but usually after a long sleep in. So it's a different schedule and routine that they have there. And from a tourist perspective, or from a foreigner perspective, you really have to get your head around what their routines are to ensure that you're not walking around empty streets trying to find somewhere that's open. We also had there was a holiday in Barcelona. It was like a Barcelona city day. I can't remember exactly what it was called. I'm really hopeless with this episode, but they pretty much shut down the city for a couple of days. They had this great big festival that night, but during the day, almost every business shut up shop, and a lot of people went out of the city to travel and get away with the families and whatnot. And we were just walking around just trying to find something to do. So there was a couple of days there where we were sort of twiddling our thumbs, and even the supermarkets had closed, so we couldn't even stock up on food. So it was interesting for a couple of days there. It was still fun, but we definitely had to get our heads around what was going on in the local area, which was kind of cool. It was a bit of a challenge, and me certainly on my phone trying to Google what the hell was going on in the area, which was a bit comical and frustrating at times. But it was definitely a cool thing to experience, a different way of life over there. I think the big thing that I've noticed is that they work hard and they play hard. There's just a never-ending cycle of late nights, long lunches, but a lot of long working hours as well, and they just cram as much into the day as they can, and it's just non-stop. So it's really, really cool to see how they live. Now, I was trying to find things to do when I was in Barcelona that I would be interested in. I've gone through this crisis over the last, I don't know, few months, where I'm just not interested in, like, I was thinking about leading up to my honeymoon and previous trips. I'm always psyched about buying things, like buying, I don't know, like trinkets and souvenirs and music, especially music. I'm always on a mission to find like rare things, especially when I go to Japan. Like, I'm always coming back with heaps of records and CDs and all sorts of stuff. But on this trip, I just was not interested in anything. I think I've been listening to the Minimalist podcast way too much because I've just been sapped of all of my energy to really be interested in anything. So going to Europe, I was really struggling to get my head around what I would be looking for enjoyment when I was there. And more or less, it was just eating and drinking, really. And just to be around in a different environment and just experience more so than collect and obtain items. But it was a struggle at times because I really was struggling where I sort of felt that I needed to buy things, buy objects. And when I couldn't really find anything that was really getting me excited, I was getting frustrated with myself, which is such a weird thing to say because really, I mean, why the hell do I need to buy anything if I don't need to buy anything, So I went through a lot of this trying to find things that would really energize me and get me excited. But one of the things that I luckily thought about was flotation. And for you guys that have been listening to the podcast, I've mentioned it a few times in previous episodes. And it's something that I've been wanting to do for quite a long time and have always been talking about, but just never, I guess, pulled my finger out and made it happen. Now, luckily, I looked it up and there was one in Barcelona. So I asked Jess if she'd be interested in going, and she was. So we booked we booked a session each online with the local flotation centre, which was only about 1 kilometre or so away from us, which was really, really close. So we went down there and went for our first ever float. The float centre was run by a guy originally from South Africa, so that made things a lot easier. I was really worried that I'd have to try and, lost in translation, try and communicate and get an understanding of what I need to do and what I didn't and whatnot through, sign language and whatnot, or, broken English. But luckily, this guy was there and made the whole process really, really easy and smooth for us. So I did my first ever float, and I guess the biggest thing that I found with it is I was already preempting my experience before I went in there. I'd listened to so many people over the years talk about what happens to them that I was waiting and expecting the same experience for me to happen. So I was going in there tense, and my mind racing a million miles an hour, looking for these things to happen. So it was a 50-minute session. And I would assume that by probably the 40th minute, started to get it. I started to finally release and let go and stop caring. And that's the last 10 minutes or so was when I suddenly went, oh, okay, this is what it is for me. And I think that's something that I've missed over time, is that the experience is different for everybody. And you really need to give up everything when you go in there and just do your best just to relax and let go of any thoughts and whatever, but without concentrating on letting go of your thoughts, but just try and just relax. And I struggled with that. My mind was going a million miles an hour. I was thinking about what I was doing for the rest of the day. I was thinking about what should be happening in there in each step of the way. Thinking about how much my body was aching because I was tense. I was still worried that my head was going to sink under the water and then get salt in my eyes. But yeah, I didn't go in there with the right approach, and I thought I would. I thought, I know how this works. Don't worry. I've got this. So it was cool because I finally got to do it and I got to experience it, and I learned a lot from it because I know now when I go back again what I need to do, and it's based off my first session and what I've experienced from the first session and what I've learned from that, rather than learning from what other people have experienced and trying to mirror what they've experienced themselves. So I'm looking forward to going back again. Obviously not in Barcelona, but I'll go to one of the ones here in Sydney or down the south coast and just get into it. I really am looking forward to using it as a semi-regular thing, whether it be once every couple of months or whatever it might be, just something that I can go in there and just do a bit of a recharge session with no expectations whatsoever, apart from just shutting off from the world for an hour and a half, and just relaxing. So it was really cool. I had a great chat to the guy that was running the place, Jess. I think she said she fell asleep for a little bit of it, but certainly had a similar experience to me where you really felt where your body was aching when lying there for an extended period of time. And I think we both were tense as well because we were trying to get used to what the whole sensation was of being in there. But yeah, it was really good. And that was something that really, I guess, mentally calmed me down, because I had something that I felt like I ticked a box being in Barcelona, not just being there and walking around the streets, but I got to have an experience there, and it was really cool. And it was nice to be able to at least tell myself that, the first time I've ever gone for a float was in Spain, and part of my trip to Spain was being at a flotation center. So it was just an extra little memory there that had some, I guess, had some meaning or had some value to me. So it was cool. So we had 2 weeks there, and I drank so many beers. I had the Untapped beer app. So if anyone is really massive on beers and isn't aware of this app, I definitely encourage you to get it, especially if you love trying different beers. You basically search for the beer and take a photo of what you're drinking, and then you basically collate little badges and things. So if you drink 5 ales, you get a little ale badge, or Pilsner, you get a little Pilsner badge. If you happen to have a breakfast beer, you get a little breakfast beer badge. If you're drinking too many beers too quickly, you get a little slow down badge. It's a novelty thing, but it's quite amusing and fun. So I made the most of this app and tried to sample as many beers as I could while I was in Europe. And by the end of the trip, I think I'd sampled about 80 different beers over 4.5 weeks, which was just chaos. It was just way too much. Fantastic beers, a couple of shit ones along the way, but on the way home from Europe, I deleted the beer app, the Untapped app, and just went, you know what, I'm taking a break from this. I'll still enjoy my beers here and there, but that app just encourages me to seek out new beers and continue to drink. So yeah, it was fun while I was in Europe, but I definitely had to put it on the shelf when I was coming home. But the beers in Spain were really cool. Estrella was basically their staple beer when everywhere, so it was a bit hard to try and communicate to get a bit of an idea of what beers were available. So most times out of 10 when I asked for Cerveza or something like that, they would send that beer out, which was fine. It was a nice beer. We didn't really get to go any craft beer places, but I bought heaps of craft beers from the local supermarkets, which was cool. I'm going through my little post-it notes. As I said, there'll be a picture of these silly post-it notes on the andysocial.net page for this for the show notes, so you can see what I'm trying to refer to. It's ridiculous. But the other thing that happened in Spain was I was looking for shows to go and check out. So I was going to go and see Destruction and Enforcer play. I didn't end up going to that. Just didn't happen at the last minute. I sort of just got lazy and just decided not to go. I've seen Destruction quite a few times over the years. Never seen Enforcer, but I'm not a massive fan. It would have been cool to see him, but wasn't enough for me to actually venture out. I was going to go and see Angra, but just didn't bother doing that. But I did see my good friend Mick Jeffrey, who's been on the podcast before, play in Barcelona with Version's Crown. I think they were on tour with a band called Nasty, I believe. I think they're a German band. And yeah, got to catch up with Mick. He was nice enough to chuck us on the door for the show, and we had a couple of beers and got to see them play. And it was cool. It was cool to be at a show in Europe in Barcelona. So it was nice to see them play. They played at I think it's called like the Razzmatazz or something like that. And it's like a multi-room venue. And I think Sepultura did one of their live shows from the early 90s there. And there's a lot of big bands that play in some of the bigger rooms there and whatever. So it was cool to go to a venue that's got a bit of history to it as well. The cool thing about Aversion's touring is that they were going through Prague when we were in Prague as well. So I was planning to meet up with Mick when they stopped through in Prague also. But unfortunately, that didn't end up happening when they did get there. So we didn't catch up for the second time. But I'm glad that we got to have some beers somewhere in Europe. So it was cool. All right, moving along because I'm waffling. After a couple of weeks in Barcelona, we got on a plane. We're flying Vueling again. Yes, just for all you airline buffs, to Prague. So it was a straight flight, nice and easy, no dramas at all. And we got into Prague and we were staying at Airbnb again, which was cool. So we had a nice place that was right near, basically in the old city. It was just smack bang right where you need to be in Prague. So we were just at our doorstep. We had every Prague landmark that you could think of. So within under a kilometre, you had the Tyr Cathedral, the astronomical clock, Charles Bridge, Prague Castle. What else? I can't think off the top of my head, but everything was there. As soon as you walked out the door, you were just met with old school Czechoslovakia, Bohemia, and what it is now as the Czech Republic, or even what they're now calling as Czechia. It was an amazing place to be in, and we just had the best location. We had this top floor apartment, really cool studio apartment layout, and we were there for about 2 weeks, and we had a nice little kitchen area and whatever, a nice little bar spot to eat and drink. We bought groceries and drinks, and we based ourselves there. We did a lot of reading. I did a lot of reflecting there, if anything, too much reflecting, where I just sort of got myself into this mental hole where I was almost felt like I was dying on the inside because I was just overthinking life way too much. But it was beneficial, and I got a lot out of just being there. And really, we slowed down quite a bit in Prague. We ensured we tried to go and see as many things as we could, but because we had 2 weeks there, we literally would go out, sometime mid-morning, go and have lunch somewhere, chill out, have some drinks, and then we would walk around and try and find one thing to go and see. And then we would either walk back and have something back at the apartment, like for dinner, or we would go out and have dinner somewhere. But we would always have like early nights. We weren't raging or anything like that. I mean, we basically turned into the old couple instantly, or we've been like that for a little while now, but we're not really interested too much in having these epic long nights of drinking and whatnot. So we were having pretty early nights almost every night that we were in Europe itself. So we had this cool routine in place. It was just chilled. There was no rush. There was no pressure to do anything at any certain time. And it worked out really well. I mean, we really got to live like the locals go to the supermarket every couple of days and buy different things. Got to eat at the local restaurants rather than a lot of the touristy ones. So we tried to, because the touristy ones were, I think they were a little bit more expensive. And when I say a little bit more expensive, they were still dirt cheap. But by the time we were there, by the time we got to our end of our time in Prague, which was like 2 weeks, I was starting to become a real tight ass, and I was getting annoyed when I was paying $3 or $4 for a pint of amazing dark beer in Prague. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. What a ripoff. Because I was so used to paying like these cheap prices in some of the more local restaurants and whatnot. So yeah, we tried to really sort of stay in the local area. And there was a few times that we had sort of dinner or lunch in a more touristy area and you know, did the whole tipping thing and whatever. Because in Prague, there's an expectation that tourists tip, not the locals, which is fine. Like the tipping is like virtually nothing because you're paying virtually nothing for your food and drink anyway. So there's no issue there. So we really made the most of that. The food there is really good, but you've really got to watch yourself because I put on a shitload of weight in Prague. All the food's really hearty food. It's all meats and breads. It's really carby sort of stuff. And they've got these potato dumplings that are just amazing. But you got to watch yourself. Everything's served with bread. That was the same in Barcelona as well. They love their breads. And I was just not giving a shit about what I was eating. I was just lapping it up and then mixing that with a hell of a lot of alcohol. I was not feeling too well by the end of our trip. I was just a big, fat, bloated sack of shit. So I was very keen to get home and start getting back on the straight and narrow. But the food was amazing. It was so cool to try all the different things, you know, the traditional Bohemia sort of food, but also the Slovak sort of food as well. And they got a bit of a German flavor in certain stuff as well, but more or less, it's just some really, really nice stuff that was there. And we tried to go through the list of the more Czech-based specialties rather than just going for the typical things. But one thing I did notice when we were there, which I found unusual, was that there are so many Italian restaurants in Prague. I saw maybe one German place, maybe 2 or 3 Spanish restaurants, but majority of them were all pizza, pasta, Italian style restaurants. I mean, we would walk in somewhere and realize that we were in an Italian style restaurant and we're like, oh, this is not what we were after. But we'd end up staying, and the food was amazing. And really, it doesn't really matter where you are in the world. Great food's great food. But at times we were searching for, you know, a real sort of traditional Czech style menu, and we're just walking into these Italian style restaurants, and it was just a bit weird because we were just trying to work out where that Italian influence came from or why it's so popular. But I mean, maybe there's something that I've missed there. So if anyone knows, feel free to let me know. While we're there, shows, I missed a couple of shows, but did manage to catch up with Riley and the guys from Desecrator, thrash band from Melbourne. They were on tour with Venom Inc. and Vital Remains and a couple of other bands. We got to see them on their first show of their whole European tour because they were doing 20-odd dates with Venom Inc. and then they were doing another 20 dates with Overkill, which at the time of recording this, I think they're still on tour with Overkill. So they must be exhausted, but it looks like they're having a great time. So we end up going to a place called Storm Nightclub or Storm Club or something like that, and got to see them play, and it was really cool. Had a great time. The beers there, I was expecting the beers to be really expensive because I'm just so used to it in Australia or anywhere else in the world where you go to a venue and all the prices have been jacked up. But the cool thing about this venue was you would pay, I think I paid $2 Australian initially for a 500ml plastic cup that had a handle on the side of it that you would, when empty, you would clip it onto your belt when you're going to the toilet, so you didn't have to put your cup down somewhere or lose your cup or whatever. And then every time you go back, you're paying the equivalent of maybe $1.50 for a refill. They would just refill your cup over and over again. And it was the best. It was, I was so amused by it and so impressed that I got Jess to take a photo of me holding the cup, which if anyone's got me on Instagram, they would have seen that several weeks ago. So that was really cool. And it was just amazing beer, really nice beer, and at $1.50 a pop, I was getting pretty drunk, so it was a big night for me. But the annoying thing that I found was dudes were just smoking inside the club, and this was like, you know, a typical old school sort of music venue where it was down several flights of stairs. It was a fire hazard. And yes, they had ventilation going, but it's not enough when you got half the room smoking cigarettes. And it got to the point where we're just feeling sick. So we ended up leaving, I think halfway through Vital Remains, and didn't get to see Venom Inc. We got to see them sound check, which was actually a little bit painful, to be honest, rather than being great. But it was just too much. We were starting to feel sick from it. And it's been a long time since I've been in a venue or been in a room with so much smoke. So I certainly wasn't used to it. So we ended up bailing. But it was good to see Desecrator and get to see them play in Europe and be a part of their first show in Europe. So that was really good. On the topic of smoking, I mean, it's interesting because Prague, I think, is in a bit of a transition. Europe's still, I think, still very much in a culture of embracing smoking. Smoking's part of their culture. They eat, drink, smoke. In a lot of restaurants, you can still smoke in there. And we certainly saw that in Prague. But I did start to notice that there are a number of places that are starting to be non-smoking. Although there was one place we went to, which was quite amusing, where they had the front part of this cafe was non-smoking and then the back part was smoking. But there was literally like an open doorway that was separating the smoking and the non-smoking, thinking that, the smoke would not possibly travel between the two rooms. So that was, and we're sitting obviously in the non-smoking section and you can still smell the smoke. So it's just redundant. But they're obviously in transition, and they'll eventually be like many other parts of the world where you won't be able to smoke indoors or near food or anything of the such. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that listen to the podcast that smoke, but if you can do what you want to do, all good. But I'll be very happy when you guys are only allowed to smoke in designated areas. I think it's just a bit too much at times when you're trying to eat and your senses are just getting slammed with cigarette smoke. And especially after that night of seeing Desecrator play, the next day, all of my clothes smelt like smoke. I had to wash everything. My hair smelt like smoke. My nostrils, my sinuses were all clogged. And, combining that with a hangover, I thought I was in Australia 15 years ago. And I definitely had an appreciation of what we do have now here in Australia, where it is very strict as far as smoking laws are concerned. And, you can go to a pub now and not have to worry about drinking in a hazy room filled with cigarette smoke. You can have a meal without having smoke around, and go and see a live band without having to worry about cigarette smoke as well. I mean, I remember years ago going to see shows in Brisbane where you would come home and just be drenched in smoke. You would just be so disgustingly smelly, and that smell would linger for days. And sometimes you would wash clothes and that smell wouldn't quite go until the second or third wash. And it was just not a nice experience. But we dealt with it at the time. Like, we didn't know any better either. So while it was annoying, we wouldn't walk into a venue and get annoyed about it, because it was what it was. So we didn't know any better at the time. But now that we've had 10 plus years of really good cigarette laws, you definitely appreciate it more. And when you do go back and have these experiences again, you realize just how lucky you are. So I certainly had a couple of rants at times about how inconsiderate people are and whatnot, and I do think at times people are inconsiderate with smoking, and I think people just will expect that people around them will just cop it. And I think that sucks. But at the same time, I do understand that, culturally, it is something that is just a way of life over there in certain parts of Europe, in a lot of parts of Europe. And it used to be like that in Australia as well. So, I'm all for eventually eradicating cigarettes altogether, not banning them, but getting to a point where people are just not interested in smoking anymore. Even for you guys that do smoke, I mean, maybe one day down the track, you just won't be interested in smoking. I know it's a hell of a habit, and you do what you want to do, and that's cool. But maybe one day it'll get to a point where you just make that decision to to give it up, save a lot of money, and probably live a bit longer as well. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox there. But what else did we do in Prague? Now on the first day second day that we were there, I was walking through the streets and there's heaps of old statues of different things and whatnot. But there was a really cool statue of a guy, a headless man with a guy sitting on the headless guy's shoulders. And I was trying to work out what the statue was, and there was a lot of people around it, and I walked past and it had the name Franz Kafka. And so I thought, keeping in mind where my mind was at when I was in Barcelona about trying to find experiences and ways to connect memories and really sort of make these trips significant, I thought I'd look into this guy and see if I could, learn a bit more about, I guess, some cultures, find out a bit more about the history of the place. So for many of you, you'll know who Franz Kafka is or was, and I didn't, because I'm a bit of an idiot and I'm not very cultural, whatever that word is for, whatever that meaning is. But I looked him up, and he's a famous Czech writer from the late 1800s. And I think he died early 1900s, I think just before World War One really kicked in, possibly. Or no, maybe he lived through World War One. I can't remember. Anyway, so he's this famous writer, and he's well respected. He wrote many books and was just an amazing writer, according to a lot of people. So I decided, you know what? This is the time to buy something. So I looked him up, and there was a number of different landmarks around the city of Prague that were dedicated to him, where he lived. There was where he used to work, studied, etc., etc. So I went to one of the main bookshops that sells a lot of his books, and I decided to buy a bunch of books. So I bought a book on all of his short stories, and I bought a book about him and his life in Prague. And I bought another book, and I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't until I put a photo up on Instagram that a friend of mine, Dan, suggested that I pick up the book that he wrote called The Trial. So I ended up going back on another occasion and picking that up as well. I did buy... I'm pretty sure I bought another book from another famous Czech writer, and I cannot remember who that was. And the reason why this is all a bit hazy is I haven't even got to the point of reading these books yet. So I'll have to, at some stage down the track, when I eventually do read these books, that I can actually give you guys some, some thoughts on what I thought of it all. But I did read the book on Franz Kafka in Prague while I was there in Prague, just to try and, I guess, connect more to the area and get some understanding and really get some meaning about my time there, instead of just, drinking and eating and walking around. So it was really cool. I enjoyed it, and I went back and took a photo of the statue. I took a photo of a couple of different areas that he lived and whatnot. And the books, even though I haven't read most of them yet, I cherish them in a way because it connects me to a place that I've been and just makes it a little bit more special. So it was really good, and I'm looking forward to, I guess, building a stronger connection with Prague through those books further down the track when I eventually get to reading them as well. So that was cool, and I really made an effort then to. I bought another book called something like The Legends of Prague or something like that, and what it was all sort of old wives' tales and old legends over the centuries in Prague, but linked into current landmarks throughout the city of Prague. So, St. Vitus Cathedral, the castle, the astronomical clock, Tyr Cathedral, Charles Bridge, all these different areas, and like the Jewish Quarter as well, which was really, really cool. And just little stories and things that happened, or more than likely didn't happen, but just interesting legends from the city of Prague. So that was a really good read, and I made sure I read that while I was there in Prague as well, just to really connect and get more out of it. So it was good. And for those people that have been to Prague, I'd love to get your thoughts on the place. I would have loved to have travelled a bit more through Czech. We did go to Kutná Hora, where the Church of Bones is. I think it's called the Sedlik Ossuary. I think I probably just completely butchered that, but that's like it's a church that was run by a group of monks, and the I'm going to get this completely wrong because I was more fascinated with just taking photos of bones while I was there. But from my understanding, the graveyard became too full, and they had to extend the church or something like that. So they dug up all the bones, and and a lot of the bones were of monks, but also just people, just common people within the village or town or whatever it was. But then they assembled them into these different, what do you call them? These patterns and things within the church itself. So you got a chandelier, this giant chandelier, which they actually didn't have there while we were there, and that's built with bones, arms and legs and skulls and all sorts of different things. They've separated all the bones into different groups and they've piled them up in different areas. And a lot of people, you would look at it and go, oh, that's absolutely disgustingly morbid. But you go in there and that feeling is not there whatsoever. And the people that work there and everything don't have that sense of morbid atmosphere there. It's something that's just, it was done in a way to show respect. It was a way to, I guess, connect with the afterlife. I could be way off on that. There's people that are Prague experts, that have been to Prague and Kutná Hora, that are listening to this now and just going, oh, you're failing, Andy, you're failing. So I'm not going to keep rattling on with that. But look it up online. It's really, really cool. I did take a few photos. I think I put them on Instagram so you can check them out as well. My only complaint, and I know I'm going off on a tangent, and I'll try and pick it back in a tick, but my only complaint about Kutná Hora is that we were on a little day tour from Prague, which was good in the sense that we didn't have to worry about anything. We were picked up from our place and dropped back there at the end of the day, but we were on a tight schedule and we were moving quickly. It was about an hour and a half out of Prague, I think. So by the time we drove there and back, we had only a couple of hours within Kutná Hora, where the Church of Bones was, but also through the village as well. So we were moving really quickly. We were with other people, so we had to be considerate of time and other people as well. And being in Kutná Hora, in the city of, in the Church of Bones, I should say, we were literally in there for probably 15 minutes. And that sucked because I wanted to stand there and take it in and really get the feeling of the place. And I couldn't do that because of the time, but I also couldn't do it because there are other tour groups there with bunches of people just taking photos and flashes going off all the time. And initially when I walked in there, I thought, you know what, I'm going to take this in and I'm not going to take any photos at all because I really don't want to be that tourist. I don't want to be that person that just is showing disrespect. You know, I said before with the 9/11 memorial in New York in the previous episode, different set of circumstances and different scenario, but the same sort of thing where you're in an area where you know, there's a lot of respect needed and a lot of personal reflection needed as well. So I was ready not to take any photos, but then when I saw pretty much 99% of the people in there taking photos, I thought, fuck it, I'm going to take a few. But I didn't take any with flash. I don't know why people use flash, you know, especially with smartphones. You're going to get the shittest photos in the world. But, you know, that's tourists for you. But I did take a few photos without flash, just really discreet photos. Didn't try and get in front of people and, you know, clog up the way and stand in front of things to stop people from looking at things or whatever. I just took discreet photos here and there when there was a gap. And I got some really cool photos, but I just could not really get into the atmosphere of the place and really understand what that place is all about because it was just such a quick trip and so many people in there. It's just like, you sort of lose the feeling of the place. But at the same time, I'm so glad that we went there and went on that day tour. And I'd love to go back there again on our own and just travel out there by ourselves and maybe go very early in the morning just as they open up, just so it's a bit quieter and really experience what the place is all about. But I'm glad I got there. But going back to what I said before, for those people that have been to Czech Republic, Czechia, have been to Prague, I'd love to know what you think, what you got out of it, things that you learnt, especially for those sort of history buffs that really have taken the time to learn about the country and the city. I'd love to know what you thought. I would assume that it won't be the last time that I go there, and I'll more than likely stop through there at some stage. in the future, in the years to come. So it'd be nice to know what other people thought of their time there as well. And I know there's a few guys that were right behind me as far as traveling to Czech. So it'd be great to know what a lot of you guys think. What else do I have here on my little things? It rained pretty much 90% of the time that I was there. We had umbrellas, and it was really, the weather was just shit, and it got really, really cold as well. It didn't really put a damper on too much because, we were able to go and see everything anyway, but the weather was just absolutely rubbish all the time there. As I said before, I spent a lot of time thinking and reflecting when I was there. I was thinking a lot about this podcast and the fact that I hadn't been doing any podcast episodes. Actually, I might touch on that really quickly now because I'm getting closer to the end of this podcast and my time in Europe. But initially, and as you guys would have heard with previous episodes leading up to my time for my wedding and going over to US and to Europe, that I really had plans to stock up on episodes and also to record while I was overseas as well. Now, I carried my podcast equipment everywhere. It went to Melbourne, it went to the US, it went to Europe, and I did not use it once. Why? I don't know. There's a number of reasons. I guess I didn't think about it. I kind of just got distracted and caught up in everything else that was going on. Didn't feel right. Like, I felt awkward at times to pull everything out and go, oh, hey, let's have a conversation, record it. I got lazy. And yeah, I was a bunch of different things, and I really kicked myself for it. And I think also I put so much pressure on myself to do it that it just put me off. It just put me off the whole thing. And over the 2 months or so that I was sort of gallivanting around the place, this lack of podcasting really ate at me. Like, at times I was having trouble sleeping because I felt so slack that I wasn't doing anything, and I just couldn't kick myself out of it. I mean, I was even going to do one with Jess while we were overseas, and we just didn't do it. Like, Jess was keen, but we just didn't do it. Just every time I sort of thought about it, it didn't feel like I was in the mood to do it, and it just never happened. And I started panicking, going, oh God, that's the end of the podcast. I've let it slip. I've lost momentum. I'm never going to do it again. This is another thing that I haven't followed through with, and just blowing things out of proportion. But, here I am now doing a bit of a catch-up episode, or 2 catch-up episodes before diving back into it. And I've had to reassure myself, and massive props to Kurt from Podkembler, who I think just grounded me a little bit with my whole crisis that I had, where there's no rules around podcasting. Yeah, there's certain things that you can do to make your podcast more popular and more successful, and one of those things is to be consistent and always have episodes coming out. But in the end, I'm dictating the rules for this podcast and what I want to do. And really, if I don't want to do something, then I shouldn't stress about it, and I should just do it when I feel like doing it. That doesn't mean I get complacent and lazy about it. I should always push myself where possible, but I shouldn't, beat myself up when things just don't happen for whatever reason. So I had to keep reminding myself of that, and that got me through my trip. But when I got home, and even now, like, just to try and get back into the swing of things has been a bit of a struggle. So I spent a lot of time, especially in Prague, thinking about this and thinking about what I was going to do and how things were going to look with this, because this podcast has been so important to me for the last 12 months. It's done so many great things, and I think at times I forgot about that. And I think now in hindsight, and hindsight's always a funny thing, isn't it? But in hindsight, if I spent a little bit more time, I guess, thinking about it a bit more when I was in the US, especially in the US during Prog Power, I mean, I could have done so much with this podcast while I was there, especially with the lack of, the slowing down of alcohol consumption during the festival. I could have had so many opportunities there to have some great conversations with people. But I think if I just realised and remembered all the great things that have come out of this podcast to date, I think I probably would have found a bit more of a drive to really sort of take advantage and make the most of those opportunities that I would have had, especially in the US, but also in Europe as well. I really thought at times whether I should, pull people up that we've spoken to and met in our travels in Europe and just have a conversation, even if it's nothing in particular, but just talk to someone from another country. And I didn't do any of that. And I think now, as the podcast moves forward and I will get back in the swing of things, and I've got a few people in mind and I've got to get back in the swing of recording, and life at the moment's pretty chaotic with work and whatever. I mean, I'm driving 4 hours a day, so I'm literally getting about an hour of free time a day before I need to pass out before the next day starts. So I need to reshuffle my life but make this podcast still work and still be fairly consistent. So there's a lot happening, and I hope that sort of as the podcast grows and I continue to push myself to keep it going, that I'll see these opportunities and it'll be easier for me to, I guess, sometimes just break out of my comfort zone. I think a lot of it's comfort zone sometimes. You feel awkward and you don't want to you feel a bit dorky, like asking people to talk, and then you think, oh God, what am I going to talk about? I haven't prepared anything. Where's this conversation going to go? I'm going to sound like a moron. And I think all those silly little things that stop us or stop me from doing anything, those things will start to, I guess, erode away as this podcast gets better and better over time. So I've had a bit of a lull with this podcast, and in some ways it's been good because I've had some time away from it and I've been able to relax in some aspects. And now I can come back with a new focus and a new perspective on it all, and really sort of see what I can do to, I guess, push it forward and make it a long-lasting thing. So as I said, and I think I mentioned in the last episode, these probably won't be weekly things for the time being because, well, we're getting to the silly part of the year with Christmas coming up soon, and there's always something going on every bloody weekend and whatnot. But I really will be pushing to get the episodes coming in more frequently, and whether, it might be a case that I can get a couple out in 1 week, or they might be weekly, or it might be every couple of weeks, or it might only be able to push out one a month, or they might not even be consistent. They might just be randomly released in no particular order or consistency or whatsoever. So it just, we'll play it by ear over the next few months as I try and sort everything out. But I'm certainly looking forward to just pushing and getting this thing to continue on in the future. And look, the feedback that you guys have given me, especially, I mean, I think one thing that really kept me going was just getting messages from people saying, hey, when's the next podcast coming out? I know you're overseas, but have you got anything that's coming out soon? And it was good just to know that people were still around and hadn't forgotten about me or the podcast. So that was good. So that sort of fueled me to continue doing this. And while these episodes are certainly waffling and probably not terribly interesting, it's a good way for me, even personally, just to get back in the swing of things and get used to, I guess, even just thinking about doing it. That's a big thing. And start thinking about, well, who are the next bunch of people that I'm going to talk to as well? And while I do have quite a few people that I have in mind, if you guys think of anybody in particular, and I look, the easiest thing for me is just to continue to pick musicians. I know enough of them, and that's usually the easiest thing. But I do find that at times the questions become repetitive. You're talking about similar topics and you get onto the same sort of rants back and forth. So I'll always have musos and I'll chuck them in all over the place as the podcast continues. But if you know someone or you know of somebody that's interesting, that's just not even connected to the music industry whatsoever, let me know. I think for me, and I've said this a million times in the past, I just want to learn more. I want to talk to more people. I want to broaden my social circles and connect with more people. And, the podcasting is such a great excuse to do that. It gives me an excuse for people to be willing to talk to me about things, and not have that awkward, hey, I don't know you, but let's have a conversation. Whereas the podcast thing, there's a bit of a purpose behind it, and there's not as much awkwardness between the parties. So, if you know someone that's got a really interesting story, it's done something really cool and interesting, somebody that works in a profession or has achieved something or anything, like just I'm always keen to learn and meet new people and connect. And I would love to be able to do that, document it, and share it with everybody as well. So I'm always up for from hearing from people. And yes, you can nominate yourself if you want, if you really think that you're interesting enough. But yeah, look, I'm always open ears, and we'll see where it goes. But there's a lot of people I've written down in my little notebook, and we'll continue on in the future. So anyway, went off on a tangent about that, but I definitely needed to touch base on the whole podcast thing and why we're where we are now. Now, I think coming home as well, sorry, while I'm on this topic, I've had so much focus and stress and whatnot, I guess, with everything that was happening and leading up to, especially in the first half of the year, that now I've had to decompress as well coming home. I've had to sort of think about where life's going in general, and what I want to do in all aspects of my life. And I've got a lot of ideas as well. And the podcast is one thing, and there are a few other things that I'd like to do that will be linked in with the podcast, and I'm hoping that I can include a lot of you guys in it as well. These are all long-term things, so we'll play it by ear, but it's good to be back and have, I guess, be a little bit fresh and have the opportunity now to have more clarity and a bit more clarity on the bigger picture and where I want, not just the next couple of months or the next 6 months, but where the next year or 5 years are for me or for us with Jess and whatever. So it'll be cool to have the podcast here to document my journey or our journey as husband and wife, and also with meeting new people along the way as well. And it'll be really cool to have you guys continue to follow it and be a part of that as well. And I love hearing from you all, especially when you connect with certain things from conversations and things that have been mentioned, and hopefully I can continue to build connections with everybody that listens. So just, I guess, wrapping this up, because I'm looking at the time and I'm pretty much getting close to an hour and a half again. And I told everyone, I promised you guys that this would be a shorter episode, but obviously not. Never trust me. So from Prague, we went to Amsterdam. We flew for airline bus. We used Scandinavian Airlines. We flew originally the plan was to fly from Prague to Stockholm to Amsterdam, just a quick half-hour stopover in Stockholm. I'd never been to Sweden before, so this is a bit of a tease for me, really, that I was like more or less standing on Swedish soil and not being able to really see anything whatsoever. But what it ended up happening was there was delays getting out of Prague. There was a connecting flight coming in that arrived late, and we just didn't get out on time. So because it was only a half-hour stopover in Stockholm, we ended up missing our connecting flights. So when we arrived into Stockholm Airport, we went to the desk and asked what was going on, and they said, no, not a problem. We've had to rebook you. You now have to fly from Stockholm to Copenhagen and then Copenhagen to Amsterdam. So we ended up getting into Amsterdam, I think, 2 hours later than what we were originally planning to be. So it was annoying, but it was kind of cool in a way, because we did 4 countries in a matter of hours. So we went from Czech to Sweden, Sweden to Denmark, Denmark to the Netherlands. And it was a long day. And Scandinavian Airlines were pretty cool. Like, I had no issues with them. They were just pretty much, they came across as a bit of a budget airline, but really had no qualms with them whatsoever. They were really, really good. And although we had a delay in Prague, like, they were very efficient. They had all the details. They didn't muck up our bags or anything like that when we had to change flights. So we were pretty happy with them. So for anyone that's going to Europe and wants recommendations, I had no issues with any of the airlines that we used in Europe, Vueling or Scandinavia. They were both pretty cool. Got into Amsterdam, and we had a couple of days in Amsterdam, more or less just to, I guess, relax and not panic between trying to get a flight back to Sydney. And I'd been to Amsterdam before years and years ago, but just hadn't been. So we spent some time walking around. It pissed down rain while we were there, so that sort of sucked. And Amsterdam is so busy. There's just tourists everywhere. You've got to battle the bikes, you got to battle the trains, you got to battle the tourists, and we also had the rain to deal with as well. So me with a small tolerance, I was in a shit mood and was grumpy and not enjoying it whatsoever. Big first world problems for me, being on the other side of the world and being in an amazing city like Amsterdam, but nevertheless, I was not in a good mood whatsoever, and I was pretty much ready to go home. We pretty much just ate and drank there. I did attempt to go to the School of Life, and we walked past it, and I decided I would just go and stop by and check the place out, because I didn't get a chance to go there in Melbourne to the store in Melbourne while I was there, which I guess in hindsight, again, like anything, I should have done that. But the one in Amsterdam, I don't think it's an actual shop. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's only open when they've got workshops on, and that's it. You can't just go in. And I think that's the novelty of the one that Kai and the guys in Australia have done, is that they've turned it into a coffee shop, so you can go in there and have a coffee and then look around while you're there, and then, you know, sign up for things and whatnot. Whereas the one in Amsterdam is literally only open for the public when there is a particular seminar on or course or whatever it might be. So, but I got to walk past there and look through the window, so that was kind of cool. So we did Airbnb there, a nice little top floor apartment there, really, really, really nice. But the most ridiculous staircase in the world. It was just this long, steep, tall staircase that was just such a struggle to get two gigantic suitcases up, because Jess bought half of Europe while she was over there, so she spent up big, and luckily I didn't take too much stuff with me, so I used my suitcase to store some of her stuff as well. But it was certainly a bitch carrying those suitcases up and down those stairs. I had to do one at a time and be really, really careful, because the stairs were that steep. But it was good. It was good to be in Amsterdam again, and I'd love to be able to go there and spend some time there when the weather's good as well. And I guess, you know, get back out and outside of Amsterdam and just see a bit more of the Netherlands again. I've done that in the past, and it was really good. It's an amazing, amazing country, so I'd love to spend a bit more time there in the future. So that was about it. And then we jumped on a plane, came home, and we had a much better flight home. So we did Singapore Airlines on the way back. Amsterdam to Singapore, we had like an hour stopover in Singapore, if that, and then straight back to Sydney, and then back to reality, whatever back to reality means. I mean, really everything's reality, isn't it? So I should stop using that term. But you know what? Just coming home, and as I said before, like, there's been so much mental preparation around the wedding, Prog Power, the US visas, playing, honeymoon, expenses. Oh, the expenses, the money was, so much money has been spent. It's out of control. And to be able to come back with, you know what, when you look at it, not a great deal of debt. It's hardly anything. We are very lucky. We were lucky to be sort of proactive with what we were doing with our money, and being very conscious about what we were spending and putting money away and saving. I think we were quite smart in a few different things that we did with the wedding itself, but, you know, all the expenses, and even for me to go to the US and be there for a week and a half and spend, you know, a decent amount of personal money while I was there, but also to go to Europe for so long, and, you know, more or less spending money every single day. We came back with only one credit card, with not a great deal of debt left on it. So I'm pretty stoked with that, pretty happy with that. So I'm looking forward to clearing that credit card and then burning it and being debt free in that regard. And I think just coming home now and being able to just take a deep breath and realize that this year has been pretty incredible. It's not over yet, and there's still a lot happening, but the big tickets have been redeemed, and it's some really big achievements in my life and in our life with Jess as well. And it's cool to be back. It's cool to get back into a routine. I've been inspired to do a lot of things, as I mentioned before, with this podcast, but also other things. There's some short-term plans and some long-term plans. I'd love to get you guys involved in a few of these things in the future. I'm looking at pushing myself creatively to do different things. I'm always reluctant to talk about it because I'm sure a lot of you can agree that when you start saying that you're going to do something and then you don't follow through with it, you feel like a dick. And I think that's been one of my biggest struggles in my life, is that I'm the king of coming up with ideas. You want me to come up with an idea for something, I'll come up with it. But to follow through with it, it ain't going to happen. It's just, I've got books and books of script with notes and things that I've written down of cool ideas, and I just don't follow through with them. Some happen, but it's just, it's one thing that I've really spent some time thinking about as far as following through with things that I want to do. And now I think I need to start making some commitments and trying to find ways to be disciplined, but to find ways to get the right perspective and continue to be in the moment and be aware and remember the reason why I'm trying to do this when at times I'm not feeling inspired to do it. I become lazy and procrastinate and whatnot. I need to just sort of remind myself why I want to do what I'm doing. So there's a lot of things there that that I want to do. So I'll leave that for future episodes. I've got my actually, another thing I'll quickly mention as well. Sorry, guys. I know that you've all got better things to do than listen to me waffle, but I have had my YouTube channel, and I did do some videos in the US. I started doing some videos in Europe, but I just stopped for the same reason as the podcast, really. I just had this mental crisis. So I will start using YouTube again and doing some videos, especially around some of these creative ideas that I've got. I'd like to just document it. And I think if I remind myself that I'm just doing it for myself, that I can look back on it in the future, then I think that'll be enough to get the momentum going again. But there's a lot of cool things that I want to do here at my home. And I'm just trying to think of ways to explain this without actually diving into this whole rabbit hole of babbling. So anyway, there's a lot that I want to do, and I think that I should be documenting it as I go and sharing it with you all as these things happen as well. I'd love to get inspiration from a lot of you as well. So if you have feedback or you think something's interesting or cool, let me know. It's always great to get a bit of fuel from other people as well, just to keep pushing myself. And if you guys are doing things as well, especially creatively, if I can motivate you guys to continue to push things that you're passionate about, then I'd love to do so. I think when you get swept up in the day-to-day life and the day-to-day grind of things, and the necessary things that you have to do to survive, you tend to always gravitate towards easier things and short-term pleasures, whether that be too much social media, sitting back and listening to music, too much alcohol, too much shitty TV, whatever it might be, whatever those short-term distractions are. We tend to sort of gravitate towards those things at times because we're just so exhausted with the day-to-day necessities that we have to tackle. So if I can hopefully motivate and inspire some people to continue to push themselves to be creative and do the things that they've always wanted to do and achieve, then I would love to be able to do that. And I'm hoping that by me documenting a lot of these things that I've got in the future, I love how I'm just darting around all this and not actually explaining anything. But I'm hoping that when I document a lot of this stuff, that it will inspire you guys to do things as well. And maybe in some things we can work together as well. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. We're getting to an hour and a half now. Great time, a long time without episodes. Great to be back. I hope you guys have enjoyed these quick catch-up episodes. Quick, what a joke. These catch-up episodes. If you have managed to get through both of them, thank you so much. Any feedback, any comments, I'd love to hear from you. As always, and this is the housekeeping part of the podcast, if you want to support, there are a few things that you can do. The best thing you can do is just listen. Continue to listen and support the podcast that way. Also, spreading word of mouth. Word of mouth is the best way to get the podcast out there to more people. And you can do that in a variety of ways, but sometimes those YouTube links are really, really good. So I upload all the episodes to my YouTube channel, which is also where all my little vlogs are and whatnot, so you can check all those stupid videos out. But you can pull them out and introduce people to this podcast or podcasts in general via a YouTube link, because a lot more people are familiar with YouTube rather than downloading a podcast app or listening to something through their browser or whatnot. So that's there, and if you guys are doing it, that'd be a great thing to do. Even if there's somebody that you know that might not be terribly interested in music but is interested in mindfulness or interested in PTSD, interested in what's a conversation with an airline pilot from India that listens to heavy metal. All sorts of different things from people, from documentary filmmakers and people from other podcasts, whatever it may be. If you know somebody that's got an interest in a particular topic that I've covered in the past, that's a great way to introduce them to what this is, and hopefully as a result we'll get a few more dedicated listeners over time as well. Finally, if you want to do a little bit more, you really, really love this podcast and you love me, and you shop on Amazon, then use the Amazon portal link. So there's two ways that you can do this. If you regularly shop on Amazon, basically nothing changes. You shop on Amazon as per normal. However, you click on a unique link, which is on my website, andysocial.net. It's on the menu bar along the top. You can click on that. It takes you to Amazon and you just do your normal shopping. What it is it's got a unique affiliate link that you click on, and it records, this sounds really invasive, but it records what you buy, and I get a small percentage of what you purchase. Now, I can't really see for the most part what you guys are buying, or I can't see who's buying, so to speak. I can see some of the items that are purchased, but I don't know who's buying what. So if you're buying suspicious things on Amazon, don't freak out. I'm not going to see what they are. I may see the items, but I don't know who's buying what. So don't worry if you're going to buy something that's a little bit questionable. That's fine. But what it does is that with particular items, I get a small percentage of what the cost of that item was. It's very, very small, but when many of you are doing it, it has a dramatic effect on this podcast. The money goes back into funding the monthly expenses of having this podcast up, the hosting of the website, the podcast itself, the gear that I'm buying for it, and it'll also fund future endeavors to make this podcast bigger and better, to reach out to more people, maybe to get on a plane and go interstate and go and spend a weekend talking to people in another city or whatever it might be. So the people that are using it at the moment, thank you so much. You guys are absolute legends. I don't even know who you are. I know a couple of you only because you've told me, but there are a number of you that are buying regularly through Amazon. So that's really cool. If you don't want to click on andysocial.net and then click on this link to go to Amazon because it's an extra couple of clicks, I get it. What you can do is go to the website once, do a right click on the Amazon portal link, save that link and save it into your toolbar. And that way you can just click on your favorites toolbar and it takes you straight there. You don't have to worry about anything like that. If you don't use Amazon, that's fine. I'm not setting up anything else at this point in time. There's no donation thing. There's no Patreon, stuff like that. It works for some people. It's not going to work for this, not at this point in time. I'm way too inconsistent with this podcast, and it's going to be a long time before it becomes anything where I would even potentially think of a Patreon type setup. And to be honest, I don't know if I'll ever do something like that. So for me, this podcast is not to ask for things from you apart from spreading the word. And it's not to ask directly for money or for anything else apart from clicking on a couple of links or sharing, commenting, liking, and that's it. That's all I want, if anything, if you ever feel like helping. But the fact that you guys are listening to the podcast, that in itself is a great thing. So I'm always grateful for that, and I'll do my best to continue to give back to you guys as much as possible as well. So that's it. Thank you so much. That's the end of my catch-up episodes. If you didn't listen to part 1, you've only listened to part 2, then okay, you can work backwards if you want to. You can listen to the other one. Next podcast, not sure when that'll be. It might be next week. It might be in a few weeks' time. Don't know yet, but stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes so that way it will remind you and give you a notification when the next episode's available, if you use that podcast platform. Otherwise, just make sure you follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or wherever else. And I'll make sure that you guys know when the next episode's out anyway. I really appreciate all the feedback, all the support, everything that you guys have been doing. Thank you so much for listening. And that is the end of me speaking. Goodbye. You're ready.